I'm Troy Kirby with a quick look at the 2022 Washington State Legislative Session. During the 2022 Washington State Legislature, lawmakers debated Senate Bill 5909, which concerned oversight of the gubernatorial powers for emergency proclamations such as the COVID-19 emergency. The bill was debated in the Senate on February 15th.
This simply puts the legislature back involved in the process in an extended emergency, like the emergency we have been living through for almost 2 years, maybe at 2 years now. We're very close, 700 and some days.
We do have a process, and the underlying bill has a process for dealing with orders from the governor as well as the enforcement of laws.
Too, have had a lot of people come to me, a lot of my constituents asking, why can't you do something? Because if you think about this, and this is just getting us back to the table in a small manner, but a very relevant manner in this amendment. I think we have to think about that. It is our responsibility to be at the table.
But there is one area that we're not involved in, and that is on the orders, the emergency orders that aren't related to suspending a law. We are involved because there's discussions and consultations, but there's no formal way for the legislature to be involved in those orders. So I appreciate my good friend, Senator Braun, for bringing forward this amendment to really hit on the one area where I think we do need a greater balance.
But there are certain emergency orders and proclamations that the legislature has not had a role. And it is for that reason that this amendment needs to be supported.
I would prefer that it wasn't 90 days. I actually think the amendment should be stronger. I think it should be 60 days or 30 days or yesterday.
The amendment that we're offering today provides a 75% threshold, Mr. President. 75%, 3 of the 4 corners have to agree to suspend an executive emergency order.
All summer, the previous summer, I was telling my constituents, we can't really do anything until we get into session. They were begging for my representation to address their concerns. Now, as it turned out, the very first bill that we passed when we came into session gave the governor continued support to continue this until he determined it was over.
The Senate's Democratic majority passed the bill 2920 on February 15th. On March 3rd at 1:24 a.m., the House started to debate the bill.
Urging the body's adoption of this amendment this evening, what it would do would be strengthen the underlying bill and provide what I believe are meaningful changes and updates to the bill, and provide some additional balance to the constitutional powers surrounding emergency powers. I believe that 2 months is plenty of time for an underlying emergency. It gives the governor broad authority over those 2 months without having to immediately report back to the legislature. But what it does do at a 60-day mark would say, we as the legislative body, the voice of the people, would have to come together to decide how we want to respond to the ongoing emergency. Secondly, it would add prohibition of activities. Currently, under state law, we as the legislative body really only have a say over suspension of statutes. And we think that that's not really far enough. We should have a say in whether or not we're prohibiting activities.
This amendment just rewrites the bill in really significant ways. This amendment would weaken our state's power to respond to a devastating emergency or disaster. And I just think it really just places some arbitrarily, short time limits on how long an emergency, will last.
The amendment that I'm offering does not in any way weaken our state's ability to respond. As a matter of fact, it allows for a broad coalition to continue to respond so that the people have a say in how they're governed.
It's not arbitrarily drawn up. It wasn't done without any thought put into it. That's not the case at all. It's well thought out, and it's purposeful. Our founding fathers, both the state level and international level, wanted a government that had equal branches of governing. And that's what this is really about. No one for a moment in here disputes the fact that the governor should be able to call a state of emergency and be able to have extraordinary powers when those times arise. The point of being able to do that is to be able to react quickly, and oftentimes when communications are in peril or other situations that require extraordinary measures to stabilize the situation. It's important that this body and our colleagues across the rotunda be able to have an equal voice after things have stabilized. It doesn't mean that the situation's fully resolved. That's not what this amendment says. This amendment says we have a voice. Yeah, stabilize the situation. If it's not stable enough, we're going to concur and keep that state of emergency going. That's all this does. It was alluded to earlier, one executive and 147 legislators. Just by very definition, we're closest to the people. And the people deserve to have a voice. And through us, they have that voice. It's just not practical to have that voice through an executive branch. That's not how our system works. And so through us, the voice of the people of this state can be heard. And we are an equal branch of government. And if the conditions warrant, we will certainly continue that state of emergency. This does not usurp any other power. It just gives a voice to the people through this body and through the other side of the rotunda. And it's critical to maintain that balance of power in this state. I urge this body's adoption. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional remarks. A good member from the 6th District, Representative Graham.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm rising in support of this amendment on behalf of the constituents in my district, both Republican and Democrat and Independent, that have been reaching out to me through emails, phone calls, meetings. Madam Speaker, this is an important amendment to restore balance to the branches of our government, to restore faith in the people that we represent.
As you've heard mentioned, Madam Speaker, I think this amendment does two main things. First, it requires the legislature to come together to renew emergency proclamations after 60 days. And contrary to what you may have heard, Madam Speaker, that's not an arbitrary date. That was chosen after looking at what other states like New York, Illinois, California do. Madam Speaker, it's also important to note that we're talking about the continuation of emergency orders, not about the continuity of government.
So the number one issue that I hear from my constituents, when are we going to fix the emergency powers? What's going on with emergency powers? I can't go to the coffee shop. I can't go out to dinner. I can't go anywhere without somebody asking me that question.
The Speaker wants to let members know we're going to defer action on this bill, but it will retain its place on the second reading calendar.
It was at this point that the House Democratic majority decided to pull the bill from the floor, and it did not get voted on during the rest of the 2022 session. The state still remains under COVID-19 emergency powers for Governor Inslee. Thank you for watching the 2022 Washington State Legislative Session.